This is Meet Sean, where we break down real life topics insurance, annuities, real estate, travel planning, and home ownership so you can make smarter moves. Subscribe so you don't miss the next episode.
Imagine this. You sell a commercial property, right? You make $1 million in pure profit.
Okay, $1 million sounds great.
Yeah, it does. But here's the crazy part. You legally pay exactly $0 in taxes to the IRS the following April.
I mean, to most people, that sounds like absolute fiction.
It really does. Because, you sit there observing the housing market right now, watching mortgage rates fluctuate wildly, and it's so easy to feel paralyzed.
Oh, completely.
Average buyers are entirely sidelined by 7 or 8% rates.
Easily. Sometimes higher, depending on the loan.
Right. Yet you look over and these institutional investors, these seasoned real estate veterans, they're out there using this hidden matrix of tax codes to effectively make the government subsidize their borrowing costs.
Yeah, they just keep building immense wealth while everyone else is frozen in place.
Exactly. It feels like they're playing a completely different game with a totally different set of rules.
Well, it definitely looks like a different game from the outside, I'll give you that. But the truth is, they aren't using different math. And they definitely don't possess some crystal ball for interest rates.
Right.
They are just deploying a highly specific set of financial mechanisms, levers, shields, tax deferrals. And these allow them to manipulate their purchasing power regardless of what the macroeconomic environment is doing.
Which is exactly the mission of today's deep dive. We are taking this massive stack of real estate strategy documents and we are decoding this hidden engine of real estate wealth.
It's going to be a fun one.
It is. We're going to unpack exactly how shifting mortgage interest rates dictate your individual purchasing power and how you can combine that baseline knowledge with, frankly, aggressive tax strategies to supercharge your portfolio.
Yeah, that combination is key.
So, okay, let's unpack this because this isn't about getting bogged down in endless spreadsheet rows. It's about understanding the core mechanisms behind a few incredibly powerful financial levers.
And, lever is actually the perfect framework here. Before we can even touch on the complex tax codes, we have to establish the foundational physics of the real estate market.
Which starts with the borrowing, right?
Exactly. The cost of borrowing money, the interest rate, is the ultimate volume dial on your purchasing power. I mean, it is the single most critical variable in wealth creation.
So let's actually walk through the mechanics of that volume dial. Because we all know conceptually that higher rates mean higher monthly payments.
Right. Everyone knows that from their home mortgage.
Exactly. But for an investor, an interest rate hike directly decreases their total borrowing capacity because of the debt service coverage ratio, right?
Yes, the DSCR. That is the magic number for commercial lenders.
Right. So the bank requires the property's income to cover the loan payment, usually by a margin of, 1.2 or 1.25?
Yeah, exactly. Meaning a property has to generate 20 to 25% more cash than the actual mortgage payment.
Okay, so when rates jump up, the monthly cost to service that loan spikes, and suddenly the property's net operating income it can't support the same loan amount.
Right. Your leverage violently shrinks. And the math on that is staggering when you scale it up. A 1 or 2% jump in rates doesn't just make the loan slightly more annoying to pay.
What does it do?
It can completely annihilate millions of dollars in purchasing power.
Wow. Million.
Oh, yeah. Like, let's say your cash flow can only support a $50,000 monthly debt service. In a low-rate environment, that $50,000 a month might let you acquire a $15 million asset.
Okay.
But in a high-rate environment, that exact same $50,000 a month might only buy you a $9 million asset.
That is a massive difference.
It's huge.
Meaning lower rates literally accelerate wealth creation because they unlock the ability to acquire significantly larger, more valuable assets using other people's money.
Exactly. You are controlling a massive appreciating asset while putting down a tiny fraction of your own cash.
There's a quote from our sources, actually, from Archimedes that I absolutely love. I think illustrates this perfectly. He said, "Give me a lever long enough and a fulcrum on which to place it, and I shall move the world."
I love that quote. And in commercial real estate, financing is that lever.
Right.
But the nuance is in how you structure that debt. Professional investors, they don't just use standard 30-year fixed mortgages like a regular home buyer.
No, of course not.
I mean, they utilize conventional bank loans for long-term stability, sure. But they also deploy alternative financing, like bridge loans.
Which, on the surface, look terrifying.
They do.
I mean, bridge loans have significantly higher interest rates in short terms, maybe 12 to 36 months. Why on earth would a seasoned investor actively choose a more expensive, riskier loan?
In a word, agility.
Agility. Okay, explain that.
Well, a conventional lender wants a stabilized, fully occupied property, right? But the real wealth is made in value-add projects.
Like buying a mismanaged, half-empty building?
Exactly. A bridge loan gives you the fast, short-term capital to acquire that distressed asset, go in there, renovate it, dramatically increase the net operating income, and then...
Oh, and then you refinance into a lower rate conventional loan once the building is stabilized.
You got it. The high interest rate of the bridge loan is just the temporary cost of forcing appreciation.
Okay, so if financing is the lever, the fulcrum, the foundation you place it on, is the asset class itself.
Yes.
And the data we are looking at points overwhelmingly to multifamily properties as the ideal fulcrum.
Absolutely, because they offer a highly resilient economic buffer against market volatility, especially compared to like single-family portfolio.
Right, there's a stark operational contrast there. I mean, with single-family homes, your income stream is binary. It's either 100% occupied or 100% vacant.
Exactly. If the tenant leaves, you pay the whole mortgage yourself. But with a 50-unit multifamily building, your vacancy risk is distributed.
So you can have 5 tenants move out in the same month.
And you still have 90% of your gross scheduled income flowing in to service that debt.
Plus the sheer operational efficiency. I mean, replacing the roof on one 50-unit building has to be vastly cheaper per unit than replacing 50 individual roofs scattered across completely different zip codes.
Oh, without a doubt. And that centralized net operating income is what gives the investor the stability to confidently apply massive leverage.
Okay, but wait. I have to play devil's advocate for a second here.
Go for it.
We're talking about taking on massive debt to buy $15 million buildings. If interest rates are currently high, or if we're entering a tightening cycle, doesn't that make this lever incredibly dangerous?
It definitely increases the risk profile.
Right, because a tax deduction or a distributed vacancy rate doesn't magically print cash on the first of the month to pay a 7% commercial mortgage. If the rent doesn't cover the debt service, aren't you just borrowing your way into a trap where the loan payments eat you alive?
What's fascinating here is that institutional investors anticipate that exact bottleneck.
They planned for it.
Yes. They don't just blindly acquire assets and hope the rent covers the high-interest mortgage. They use the next set of tools in their arsenal to radically manipulate the property's cash flow.
Okay.
They engineer a financial surplus to safely cover those loan payments, totally regardless of the rate environment.
Which brings us to the moat around the castle.
Moat, yes.
If leverage builds the wealth, taxes threaten to tear it right back down. Because interest rates dictate how much property you can buy, protecting the rental cash flow from the IRS is the only way to sustain those heavy loan payments.
And the primary mechanism for that protection is depreciation.
Right.
It is arguably one of the most powerful wealth-building tools in the entire U.S. tax code, yet it is almost entirely misunderstood by novice investors.
So let's get into the nuts and bolts of it, because it is a, quote, non-cash deduction.
Yes.
The IRS essentially views the physical structure of your property, not the land underneath it, obviously, but the building itself, as a decaying asset.
Right. It's wearing out over time.
It has a predetermined useful lifespan, usually 27.5 years for residential property. So the government just allows you to deduct a portion of the building's purchase price from your taxable income every single year.
Exactly. And the critical distinction here is the difference between real-world appreciation and paper depreciation.
Okay, what do you mean?
Well, your multifamily building might be skyrocketing in actual market value, right? You could be raising rents, making more gross revenue every year. But on paper, for tax purposes, the IRS assumes the asset is degrading.
And this addresses two massive misconceptions in the real estate world from our sources.
Oh, definitely.
First, people falsely believe depreciation only applies if the property is actually falling into disrepair or losing market value.
Which is false.
Right. And second, they think high mortgage rates somehow neutralize depreciation benefits because the high interest is eating the profits anyway.
And that second point is a super dangerous misunderstanding. Depreciation is a permanent tax advantage specifically designed to shield your rental income.
Let's walk through the math on that.
Okay, let's say your property generates $100,000 in net operating income. Normally, you'd pay income tax on that full $100,000.
Makes sense.
But if your depreciation deduction is $60,000, you only pay taxes on $40,000.
Even though you physically collected the full $100,000 in cash from your tenants.
Exactly. You artificially suppress your taxable income while your actual cash in the bank remains completely untouched.
So it's essentially like having this magic financial shield that makes a massive chunk of your income completely invisible to the IRS simply because time is passing.
That is a great way to put it. That tax savings creates a massive cash flow surplus.
So you redirect the money you would have paid the IRS, and you use it to service the higher debt of a 7 or 8% mortgage.
Precisely.
You're essentially using tax efficiency to subsidize your borrowing costs. You know, it reminds me of that Albert Einstein quote from our background reading.
Oh, which one?
He supposedly said, "The hardest thing in the world to understand is the income tax."
Huh. Yeah, well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, seasoned investors take this even further with a mechanism called cost segregation.
Oh, this is fascinating. Explain cost segregation.
Okay, so instead of depreciating the whole building evenly over 27 and a half years, they hire engineers to come in and break down the property into components.
Like what kind of components?
Like appliances, carpeting, specialized plumbing, landscaping, because those specific items have much shorter IRS lifespans, like 5 or 15 years.
Which allows the investor to dramatically accelerate the depreciation.
Exactly. You front-load massive tax deductions into the first few years of ownership.
Meaning you get an enormous influx of tax-free cash flow right when you purchase the asset.
Yes, that is the safety net. That accelerated surplus is exactly what you need to confidently manage the higher loan payments that come with tighter interest rate markets.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting. Let's say you've executed this flawlessly. You use the lever of financing to acquire a distressed multifamily property. You used bridge debt to force appreciation. You stabilized it, and you used accelerated depreciation to shield the cash flow.
Textbook execution.
Right. Now, the property is a well-oiled machine, but you've completely maximized its value. You've outgrown the asset, and you want to scale up into a much larger complex.
Which is the natural progression, right? You move from a 10-unit to a 50-unit to a 200-unit.
But there is a massive roadblock here. If you sell that 10-unit property outright to buy the 50-unit, you trigger massive capital gains taxes.
Oh, and depreciation recapture.
Right. The IRS comes calling for all those taxes you deferred. Writing like a $500,000 check to the government would instantly destroy a massive portion of the wealth you just spent years building.
It would completely cripple your purchasing power for the next property. It would bring your momentum to a dead stop.
And that is where Section 1031 of the Internal Revenue Code comes into play. The 1031 exchange.
The Holy Grail. It is the ultimate growth hack for institutional wealth.
Let's explain the mechanism of this, because it's basically a game of financial hot potato.
It really is. So a 1031 exchange allows an investor to defer their capital gains taxes by rolling the profits from the sale of one property directly into the purchase of a new, quote-unquote, like-kind property of equal or greater value.
But the key word there is defer. You are not eliminating the tax. You are just kicking the can down the road.
Exactly. But by keeping your full equity intact, you ensure every single dollar of your profit continues working for you. It's essentially an interest-free loan from the government.
Because if you have $1 million in equity from a sale, and you don't lose 20 to 30% of it to taxes, you enter the next transaction armed with a massive down payment.
Right. Which means you can demand better loan terms, or you can offset the sting of high borrowing costs by just putting more cash down.
But the rules around executing a 1031 are notoriously brutal, aren't they?
Oh, they are unforgiving.
You have exactly 45 days after the sale of your relinquished property to formally identify the replacement properties. And you have 180 days total to close.
And this raises an important question about market dynamics. Think about it. In a high interest rate, low inventory environment, that 45-day identification window is an absolute pressure cooker.
45 days is nothing.
It's nothing. Finding a property that actually cash flows at a 7% interest rate, negotiating the deal, and getting it under contract in 45 days, it requires meticulous, high-level planning.
And the most critical rule, which I found mind-blowing, you cannot touch the money.
Never.
You have to use a qualified intermediary, like a neutral third party, to hold the funds in escrow between the sale and the purchase.
Yes, that is strictly enforced.
Because if the cash from the sale hits your personal bank account for even 1 second, the exchange instantly fails and the entire tax bill becomes due immediately.
It's terrifying. The execution risk is incredibly high, but the alternative is surrendering a third of your net worth to the IRS every single time you scale.
Which you just can't do if you want to grow.
Right. Scaling your portfolio through a chain of 1031 exchanges allows you to leapfrog from smaller assets to institutional-grade properties. You just keep compounding your wealth tax-free until you eventually pass the assets to your heirs.
Okay, so we have the volume dial of interest rates, we have the shield of depreciation, and the catapult of the 1031 exchange.
Good summary.
But as you use these tools to scale up, you transform from a mom-and-pop landlord into a large commercial operator. And with larger assets come exponentially larger operational risks.
Oh, absolutely. It's a whole other ballgame.
Because all these high-level rate manipulations and tax deferrals, they don't mean a thing if an unexpected disaster, a lawsuit, or just a bleeding asset drains your capital. We need to transition into operational fortitude.
Building the wealth via leverage and tax strategy is only half the equation, honestly. Preserving that capital is the other half, and it requires a fortress-like approach to both the physical and the financial health of the asset.
So on the financial side, meticulous expense tracking isn't just about, good bookkeeping. It's about maximizing your tax position.
Right.
And a huge part of that, from our sources, is understanding the vital difference between tax deductions and tax credits.
This is a huge distinction.
A deduction, like the depreciation we talked about earlier, or a home office deduction, it lowers your taxable income.
Right. So if you make $100,000 and have a $10,000 deduction, you only pay taxes on $90,000.
Exactly. But a tax credit directly lowers your actual tax bill, dollar for dollar.
Yes. So if you owe the IRS $15,000 and you have a $5,000 tax credit, your final bill is reduced to $10,000.
I always think of it this way. Deductions are like a store discount on the items you bought. They're great. They lower the overall price.
Sure.
But a tax credit is like finding a $100 gift card in your pocket when you get to the register. It is actual bottom line currency.
That is an excellent way to conceptualize it.
Yeah.
And the government uses these credits to heavily incentivize certain behaviors in real estate developers.
Like what?
Well, savvy operators actively seek out properties where they can claim substantial credits for doing, say, historic rehabilitations, or installing energy-efficient solar systems, or setting aside units for low-income housing.
Yeah.
These credits can fundamentally alter the profitability of a project, generating massive infusions of capital.
And that capital is often what funds the physical protection of the asset, which is layered commercial property insurance.
Oh, yeah. You cannot skimp on this.
We're not just talking about a basic policy that replaces a burned-down roof here.
No, commercial risk management is highly specialized. The anatomy of coverage starts with the standard property structure and content, sure, but the real defense is in business income insurance.
Right, this is critical, because if your 50-unit building suffers a catastrophic fire and becomes uninhabitable for 12 months, you don't just lose the building. You lose the net operating income that pays your mortgage.
Exactly. And business income insurance actually replaces that lost rental revenue during the reconstruction phase, ensuring you don't default on your loan while the building is empty.
Wow. And you also have to layer general liability, right, to protect your equity from slip-and-fall lawsuits or tenant litigation.
You do. But the real trap for investors here is in the exclusions.
The fine print.
Always the fine print. Standard commercial policies almost never cover predictable wear and tear, intentional destructive acts by tenants, or regional environmental disasters like floods, sinkholes, and earthquakes.
Which means if you buy a multifamily property in a flood zone and rely on standard coverage, you are literally one bad storm away from bankruptcy.
Yes. You have to aggressively audit your risks and purchase specialized writers.
But let's pivot to a scenario where the disaster isn't physical, but financial.
Okay.
Sometimes, despite all the meticulous underwriting and the insurance, an asset just bleeds money. The local market shifts, maybe a major employer leaves town, or the property just becomes an endless money pit.
It happens to the best institutional funds, honestly. The difference is in how they react. Amateurs hold on to bleeding assets out of ego, just hoping the market turns around. Professionals use a mechanism called tax loss harvesting.
Okay, I want to push back on this concept a bit because on its face, it sounds completely counterintuitive.
Fair enough.
Tax loss harvesting involves intentionally selling an underperforming asset at a financial loss and then using that loss to offset the capital gains from other successful sales in your portfolio.
Yes.
But aren't we just putting a fancy name on admitting defeat? I mean, why would anyone celebrate losing money on a property?
Well, you're not celebrating the loss of capital. You are mathematically optimizing a bad situation.
Okay.
Think of it as a strategic retreat. If you have a property draining $3,000 a month in negative cash flow, that drain threatens your ability to service the debt on your healthy, performing assets.
It's like an infection spreading to the rest of the portfolio.
Precisely. By selling the leaser, you cauterize the wound and stop the cash flow drain. But the brilliance is in the tax offset.
How does that part work?
Let's say you just executed a highly profitable sale on another property, and for whatever reason, you couldn't do a 1031 exchange.
Okay, so you're facing a massive tax bill.
Right, say a $200,000 capital gains tax bill. If you sell your bleeding asset and take a $200,000 capital loss on it, you harvest that loss, apply it against the gain, and completely wipe out the tax liability of your winner.
Oh, wow. So you free up whatever trapped equity was left in the bad property, you eliminate a massive tax bill on a good property, and you redeploy that surviving capital into an asset that actually cash flows.
Exactly. It's not a defeat. It's capital reallocation. It keeps your overall debt service manageable and your portfolio mathematically sound. You are conceding a battle to ensure you win the war.
So what does this all mean for you listening? Let's trace the strategic journey we've just unpacked today.
It's a journey, for sure.
It is. So the macro cost of borrowing, those terrifying fluctuating interest rates, that serves as the initial volume dial in your purchasing power. When rates hike, leverage violently shrinks.
Yeah.
When they drop, acquisition power accelerates. But the true game is played after the purchase. Tax strategies, particularly the non-cash deduction of accelerated depreciation, they act as an invisible shield, legally suppressing your taxable income so you can use that surplus to confidently service high-interest debt.
Exactly.
Then, when you've maximized an asset, the 1031 exchange becomes your catapult, allowing you to defer capital gains and roll your compounding equity into larger institutional-grade properties.
Spot on.
And finally, meticulous operational fortitude, from hunting down dollar-for-dollar tax credits to layering business income insurance to ruthlessly executing tax loss harvesting, that builds an impenetrable fortress around that wealth.
It is a brilliantly engineered system when you view all the mechanisms working in concert like that.
It really is.
But I want to leave you with one final thought, something that jumped out from the very end of our deep dive into the source material. It's a completely different perspective on risk management.
Oh, the concept of community impact.
Yes. The strategic value of the social side of multifamily investing. We spend so much time analyzing debt service coverage ratios and depreciation schedules, but the data indicates that truly elite property management relies on localized integration.
Like hiring local vendors, proactively revitalizing neglected neighborhoods, that sort of thing.
Exactly. Authentically supporting local economies. It raises a fascinating alternative hypothesis for wealth preservation.
What's the alternative?
What if the ultimate real estate strategy isn't just about outsmarting the IRS with cost segregation or perfectly timing a bridge loan in a volatile rate market?
Okay.
What if, by actively improving the economic and social health of your property surrounding community, you create a tenant base that is profoundly stable and deeply loyal to your building?
So an economic moat built on human capital instead of just tax codes.
Exactly. When you foster a thriving localized ecosystem, vacancy rates plummet naturally. Turnover costs just vanish. Your investment becomes organically insulated from the macroeconomic shocks of the outside world.
That's a powerful thought.
A perfectly optimized spreadsheet can certainly build your wealth, but maybe cultivating a thriving, resilient community is the only way to actually guarantee it.
That's it for today's Meet Sean. If this helped, follow the show and share this episode with one person who needs it. See you next time.